Namaskar. Today, I thought we'll talk a little bit about food. And I think this is important because a human being's relationship with his food is the most intimate relationship that he has, right? We are worried about what goes into our lungs. We're worried about the count of, the quality of air. We're worried about there are a lot of sensors all around when it comes to graphics. So some sites are prohibited, and some kinds of visual entertainment is filtered before it comes to us. Some words are not allowed because they're profanities. Because what we put in our body is really important. And of course, there are so many taboos around sex and such, because that's also a very intimate consumption. But of all the consumptions that we can possibly have, you'd imagine you actually put food inside you, literally inside you. And it goes so far inside that it actually comes out, whatever is left of it. So it's a very intimate connection with human beings, and therefore it has a profound impact on a human being. And this impact is both physical and mental and spiritual. And today, I thought we'll talk a little bit about that physical impact that food has, and we can discuss the spiritual and the mental aspect of food, perhaps in another video. If we have enough time, we'll discuss it here. But I really wanted us to understand the physical impact of food that that we experience in our bodies. And this whole class today is not so much spirituality, however much I like to propagate it and talk about things from a spiritual perspective. This whole session today is mostly about physicality. So most of us, we've been eating since we were born, right? And we have not stopped eating unless we faced famine or some grave circumstance. We've basically kept it up for so many years. And even though we've done an activity for so many years, we've not really thought about it. We don't even know how the physicality works around it. Like literally, if I asked 100 people, how does food affect your body, they will not know what to tell you. In a side note, do you know why alcohol is bad? Alcohol you put inside your body, what happens? What happens if you put alcohol in the fire? Anybody try to cook with alcohol? Catches on fire. This whole human body, it requires fuel. When you put alcohol in the system, it's the easiest fuel. So therefore, you've seen that there are monitors around traffic signals where people might be drunk. What happens? Alcohol travels into your system very, very quickly because it burns away, and it gets spread into your system very, very quickly. A lot of people have many food related diseases. In fact, scientists have now proven that 90% of diseases that exist because of food related problems. So if everything you put in your body is fuel, there are some fuels that are easy to burn and some fuels that are harder to burn, right? Let's look at all types of fuels, and we talked about alcohol. Alcohol is the easiest to burn. It burns very quickly. It affects the entire cellular structure of your body, and we know for sure it has no merit, except if you do not utilize the energy that it produces, what happens? That conversion happens from alcohol to fuel, and if the fuel is not utilized completely, it becomes fat or reserves that get kept in your body for a very, very long time. I stopped drinking many years ago, like perhaps it's been 6 years, and I was very fond of a drink every now and then. And in my time as a dancer, I realized that even if I consume 30 ml of alcohol, 30 ml of alcohol, that is like one small peg of alcohol, it took my body 6 weeks to flush it out. 6 weeks to flush out 30 ml of alcohol. So if you're a sports person or a dancer, I'm sure you can experiment with this and experience it. Because even if you're running on the treadmill, you won't be able to achieve that speed that you had before alcohol, after alcohol, for a very, very long time. You'll get back to it after 5, 6 weeks, not before that. It takes a long time. So alcohol converts into fuel. If you are working out or something, or doing some kind of rigorous activity, it'll get burnt, but still, because we do not consume everything, or we are not able, the bodily system is such that it's very, very efficient. We talk about energy efficiency and we talk about managing the losses when we are running factories, etc. Our body is perfect, very energy efficient. You utilize only 5% of the energy that you generate from any fuel. The rest gets stored and it slowly gets released into the system as the system needs it. Okay. So the first kind is alcohol. The second kind of fuel that gets released into the system is the kind that comes from carbohydrates or sugars. Almost imagine like the easiest way to light a fire is to put alcohol on it, right? The second easiest way is to put small twigs, little twigs, right? Little grass. It'll catch fire very, very quickly. So sugar and carbohydrates behave in that kind of fashion for our system. They burn up very, very quickly. There is a special chemical that releases in the system called insulin to burn up these sugars and carbohydrates. This actually basically contains anything sweet, any kind of cereal, burns very quickly. It's a nice roughage, right? And again, the body is only consuming 5% of what you are consuming, right? It's only utilizing that much. The rest, 95%, what happens with it? Gets stored. Every day, everything you eat, 95% of the energy is extracted out of it and is stored. Okay? The third kind of fuel that goes into that can fuel up the system, the third kind of fuel is fats and protein. Okay? Any kind of fats and proteins. And these fats and proteins are a little bit higher. Like, for example, if you try and light ghee on fire or any kind of oil, oil can give you fire, but can you make oil give you fire without any medium? Is it possible? Possibly not. If you don't have any wood on which that is doused with oil, I'm talking about fat oil, you can't probably light it. But when you do, when you have a little bit of wood and you keep pouring oil, what happens? It burns into a very nice, very, very successful fire, right? So there are three kinds of fuels that give you energy: alcohol, carbohydrates, sugars, proteins, and fats. Who's to say what's good? There are when there is alcohol in the system, it gets burnt very quickly, it gets distributed in the bloodstream, and it gets stored as fat. We are not talking about the quality of fat, but the energy gets stored. When there is carbohydrate in the system, it burns really quickly with the help of insulin, and it produces energy very easily. It's like twigs on fire, and 5% is consumed. The rest is stored away in some kind of fatty cell in your body. And the third is protein and fats. This burns very, very hard. It doesn't normally burn in a normal person's system. When it does, when it gets utilized, it gets converted into good fatty acids and muscle. So we understand now that there are 3 fuels that the body can use. Obviously, we're not looking at alcohol. But it is worth understanding what happens in the body when you start to process carbohydrates. This is important because between carbohydrates and sugars and fat and protein, there is a huge amount of difference. Carbohydrates are very easily digested or burnt. And insulin almost works like a match to that. Like it is perfect. The moment there are carbohydrates in the system, insulin needs to be released for it to burn down this influx of energy giving material. Right? Now, because insulin burns down all the carbohydrates very, very quickly, if there is no insulin in the body, there is a problem. There's almost a toxicity of sugar or carbohydrates. And this problem is termed as the disease diabetes. Okay? Diabetes is a state that a human body comes to when it has carbohydrates in the system and there is no medium to start putting these carbohydrates at work, which means that there is no insulin in the body, which is usually produced by an organ called pancreas. And when this organ is not producing insulin, you have artificial insulin to basically ingest that food in your body. Does that make sense so far? Now, so we have carbohydrates and we have a direct dependence on insulin, right? And carbohydrates give you energy very quickly, and insulin is the medium that helps you get energy from carbohydrates. So, what happens when we eat? We usually eat a combination of things. These days, a lot of sugars and a lot of carbs. And even when we have protein and fat, the system that is digesting the food in our body, because there are carbs, the moment there are carbs and sugars, what needs to get released? Insulin. So the system that is digesting our food, whenever you put carbohydrates in your body, is insulin dependent. Okay. So, and this system works very, very quickly. Like it really does its job amazingly quickly. So you ate food, insulin was produced by the pancreas, ingested everything, you're using only 5%, and the rest of the 95% becomes fat, stored. And when insulin is in action, when insulin works, then at that time, your body does not burn any fat. It does not burn any fat cells, or protein is not processed properly. None of that happens. It's basically a really overdrive into digestion, which is insulin driven, and everything gets fragmented and digested and ingested, and what becomes of it? It becomes fat. For the last about 10 years, we've been doing this crazy 6 meals a day, 5 meals a day, like every hour we snack. Imagine when we go back, like when we were not so civilized, or even when we were moderately civilized, what would people do? People were like animals, right? They would go out in the morning, they would probably get 1 meal a day, probably not, some nuts and fruits, whatever, and come back home and sleep. And sometimes they wouldn't get something. Maybe they go through a long winter, or they didn't have too much food. They subsisted on dried meats or hunt. So in olden days, there was not so much food going into the system. In olden days, the way the body worked was when you put in food, there was insulin. And then there were times when there was no food. At that time, the body actually utilized those cells, those stores that it had put away. At the time of insulin digestion or insulin-led digestion, there was stores that were created, and those stores were accessed in times when there was no other source of food. In the last about 15, 20 years, food has come to us fairly easily. And the rate at which we burn it, like our physical activities have come down considerably. So imagine the intake of food, even if it remained the same, and our physical activity has come down considerably, when do we actually get to use those stored cells of energy in our body? Never. We never get to use them. We are eating and insulin gets released, and then even before it stops working, we eat again, and then there is more insulin released, and then before that stops, we eat again. We have breakfast, then we have a midday snack, then we have a lunch, then we have a evening tea, then we have dinner, and then we have maybe even a midnight snack, because all of us are waking up or staying awake till really late. So you want to probably eat a little bit more. Now, what happens is that insulin takes about 7 to 8 hours to stop working in your system. If you put in food again in your system, insulin starts the cycle again. What is it doing? It burns up the food and stores it as fat. Okay. So you have this perpetually driven, insulin-driven cycle. And lo and behold, if you don't have enough insulin, you have this increased rate of diabetes in the system, because we are a very insulin-driven society. Almost, right? Insulin-driven society, because our eating pattern is so rigorous, right? It is like breakfast, bed tea, breakfast, lunch, tea, dinner, late night something snack. Very rigorous eating pattern, because we're putting so much inside our system. We are almost an insulin-driven society, and if insulin, God forbid, stops working, if it is not being produced by pancreas, we have huge amount of blood sugar, because that is not getting processed in our system. So we have diabetes. And if anybody in your family has diabetes, you know, diabetes leads to heart disease, because what happens? Because that food is not digested properly. Fats are not digested properly because you didn't have enough insulin. Your arteries get clogged, your liver gets fatty, everything, the way this thing gets stored in an unprocessed fashion in your body is actually hurtful to your body, right? So you have this perpetual spike in insulin, and this insulin has to keep pace with your eating, and sometimes it breaks down. So we have widespread disease of diabetes. And it's quite a problem. And not only that, because you have diabetes, you also have heart disease, you have fatty liver, you have liver disease. Did you know that in the last decade we had maximum number of deaths not because of heart disease, because of liver disease, liver malfunction? So it's become a very widespread problem. So from this we can figure there are two states of human existence. One is the fed state, fed, right? When somebody has already eaten, a fed state. And the other is a fasted state, where you haven't eaten anything. Let's understand what happens in a fasted state, right? Say you didn't eat anything, you had your meal and then you didn't eat anything for more than 10 hours. After 10 hours, now your body constantly needs energy. Your head, your brain, for it to function, it needs glucose on a regular basis, constant supply of glucose. That's how you're alive, constant supply of glucose. So if you don't have anything for about 9 hours, that insulin-driven supply of glucose is not there. And therefore, the body still has to produce glucose because your brain needs glucose to function. So what will happen in your body is, at this time, your body will start breaking down all the reserves, all the storage that you have. This is the time that you actually start burning your fat cells or reserve cells. And when this starts happening in your body, you're actually cleaning up your body. So because you've been saving up for it forever, right? You've been eating carbs and sugars and everything forever. So as your body starts ingesting and digesting that reserve of food that was there for that use only, you start losing weight, your heart becomes healthier, because that's where the artery stored it. The fat, the liver stops being a fatty liver because that fat is being used. All of that has become a disease will slowly start to shrink. It becomes lesser and lesser. Obesity goes away, fatty liver goes away, heart disease goes away, and diabetes goes away. Because if you are not putting in food in your body every 3 hours or 2 hours, you don't need so much insulin. Right? Does that make sense? So I really wanted to explain what happens when you eat so much and so frequently. Even if you're having really small meals, the tiniest amount. If you put a slice of bread in your body, it is 100 calories. If you put a banana in your body, it is 100 calories. If you put 18 potato chips in your body, it is 100 calories. And the moment you hit 100 calories, insulin will get released in your body. You cannot put anything in your body, even a glass of milk is 100 calories, without releasing insulin. And the moment insulin gets released, you convert things and put them away you convert energy into storage, stored energy, and then you put it away for future. So there are two states, fasted state and the fed state. The fed state is not a very good state. This has got heightened levels of insulin. You have excess calories in your cells, in your fat cells. And the burning of fat or the burning of real fuel is actually halted in your body. There is no burn in your body. It is a small chemical conversion from insulin to energy. In the fasted state, insulin is low. The body has to regurgitate, like, it really has to work and burn that fat tissue. It starts mobilizing stored fat from the cells, and it's burning fat for energy. Okay, so the only time you burn fat is when you are in your fasting stage. So here's an interesting example, right? Imagine that there is a truck full of fuel. It has 10,000 gallons of fuel, and it's running on the highway, and it runs out of fuel. Will it not move forward? Will it stop running? Because it has 10,000 gallons of fuel. It can totally refuel itself, and it can run for a long, long, long time. Nothing's going to happen to it. It's not going to be stranded. Here's another fun fact. If you were a highly obese person, would you ever be hungry? There was a world record for fasting, which went for a man who was 456 pounds, which is about roughly 230 kgs. So this man who was 230 kgs fasted for 382 days. Only water and vitamins. And he lost 176 pounds, which is about 135 kgs. During 382 days of fasting, he lost 276 pounds. Stop being obese, obviously. Now this guy is about 180 odd pounds, like that's about 90 odd kgs. So that's normal. That's easy. And he went on fasting for more than 1 year, and nothing happened. No ill effects. Interesting. So it's not difficult for somebody to fast. It's not bad to fast. In fact, the only time your body stops needing insulin and starts burning fat is when you start to fast. So there are merits in fasting. And now this has been proven by science. And we're going to talk about what these things are a little bit. There are technical terms around it. But I'm going to discuss that in another video. But for now, here's a thought. Should we put the next meal in our body? Or should we just wait a little bit? We can wait. We eat a little early, we can burn more fat. Like, for example, if you ate at 7 o'clock in the evening or 8 o'clock in the evening and you didn't eat something till about 10 o'clock in the morning, it's great. You actually fasted for 14 hours. At this juncture, when you wake up and you haven't eaten anything, it's been a while. From 8 o'clock to 8 o'clock is 12 hours. So I'm saying 10 o'clock. So 8 o'clock to 10 o'clock is 14 hours. You fasted for 14 hours. There is no insulin right now in your body. Your body is probably burning fat, right? At this point in your day, what you do is you have a big paratha or a big bowl of cereal, putting carbohydrates in the system. The moment that goes inside, what happens? The moment carbohydrates goes inside, sugar goes inside. You have a glass of tea or milk or something with sugar. The moment that goes inside, you're going to have insulin released, and your fat burning will instantly stop. So right now, if you haven't eaten till 10 o'clock in the morning, your body is burning fat. Okay? Take a spoonful of butter. It's not going to hurt you early in the morning. Maybe a spoonful of cream, malai. And that's it, to lunch. Now your body has been burning fat for 16 hours. This is really good, guys. This is really good. So think about fasting as opposed to eating all the time. There are lots of benefits, there are lots of spiritual benefits, and we're going to talk about that. And there is scientific proof behind it, and we are going to talk about that in the upcoming videos. This is long enough, so I'm going to stop here, and I'm going to talk about this in another video. We're going to discuss the science around this, and in another video, we're going to discuss the science that used to exist, how in our Sanatan Dharma, in the Vedic times, they had studied this and they had perfected it, and what they had suggested and what they had proposed for perfect human expression. We're going to talk about that. So 2 separate videos after this. Look out for them, and I'm going to save this here, hoping that you guys will think twice about putting anything in your mouth which is carbohydrates or sugars before at least 16 hours. Namaskar.